We'll begin with Canto 1, Chapter 13, verse 42. Say the prayers first. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So again, we're reading Canto 1, Chapter 13, verse 42. I'll share my screen. Okay. Yatha gavo nasi protas tantyam badascha damabhi vaktantyam namabhir badha pahanati balim ishitu. The word by word. Yatha, as much as. Gava, cow. Nasi, by the nose. Prota, strung. Tantyam, by the thread. Badha, bound by. Cha, also. Damabhi, by ropes. Vak tantyam, in the network of Vedic hymns. Namabhi, by nomenclatures. Badha, conditioned. Pahanti, carry on. Balim, orders. Isitu, for being controlled by the Supreme Lord. Translation. As a cow bound through the nose by a long rope is conditioned, so also human beings are bound by different Vedic injunctions and are conditioned to obey the orders of the Supreme. I'm going to read that one more time. As a cow bound through the nose by a long rope is conditioned, so also human beings are bound by different Vedic injunctions and are conditioned to obey the orders of the Supreme. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Every living being, whether a man or an animal or a bird, thinks that he's free by himself, but actually no one is free from the severe laws of the Lord. The laws of the Lord are severe because they cannot be disobeyed in any circumstance. The man-made laws may be evaded by cunning outlaws, but in the codes of the Supreme Lawmaker, there is not the slightest possibility of neglecting the laws. A slight change from the course of God-made law can bring about a massive danger to be faced by the lawbreaker. Such laws of the Supreme are generally known as the codes of religion under different conditions, but the principle of religion everywhere is one and the same, namely to obey the orders of the Supreme God, the codes of religion. That is the condition of material existence. All living beings in the material world have taken up the risk of conditioned life by their own selection and are thus entrapped by the laws of material nature. The only way to get out of the entanglement is to agree to obey the Supreme. But instead of becoming free from the clutches of Maya or illusion, foolish human beings become bound up by different nomenclatures, being designated as Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras, Hindus, Mohammedans, Indians, Europeans, Americans, Chinese, and many others, and thus to carry out the orders of the Supreme Lord under the influence of respective scriptural or legislative injunctions. The statutory laws of state are imperfect imitation replicas of religious codes. The secular state, or the godless state, allows the citizens to break the laws of God, but restricts them from disobeying the laws of the state. The result is that the people in general suffer more by breaking the laws of God than by obeying the imperfect laws made by man. Every man is imperfect by constitution under conditions of material existence, and there's not the least possibility that even the most materially advanced man can enact perfect legislation. On the other hand, there is no such imperfection in the laws of God. If leaders are educated in the laws of God, there's no necessity of a makeshift legislative council of aimless men. There is necessity of change in the makeshift laws of man, but there's no change in the God-made laws because they're made perfect by the all-perfect personality of Godhead. The codes of religion, scriptural injunctions, are made by liberated representatives of God in consideration of different conditions of living and by carrying out the orders of the Lord, and the conditioned living beings gradually become free from the clutches of material existence. The factual position of the living being is, however, that he's the eternal servitor of the Supreme Lord. In his liberated state, he renders service to the Lord in transcendental love and thus enjoys a life of full freedom, even sometimes on an equal level with the Lord, or sometimes more than the Lord. But in the conditioned material world, every living being wants to be the Lord of other living beings. And thus, by the illusion of Maya, this mentality of lording it over becomes a cause of further extension of conditional life. So in the material world, the living being is still more conditioned until he surrenders unto the Lord by reviving his original state of eternal servitorship. That is the last instruction of the Bhagavad Gita and all other recognized scriptures of the world. Okay. There's a lot to unpack here in this section that we just read. So maybe before we get into the crux of this verse, just some overall context of where we are in the Bhagavatam, in case we haven't read the previous verses. So in this chapter, Dhritarashtra has quit home. Vidura has come, advised him, and he's left the palace at this point. And Yudhishthira was, doing his morning duties, and as part of them, one of them was to pay respects to the elders. And so he's searching for Vidura and Dhritarashtra, and he can't find them. They're gone. And he asks Sanjaya about it. Where have they gone? And Sanjaya says, I don't know myself. And of course, Narada Muni appears on the scene at that moment, and Yudhishthira is asking Narada Muni now, where have my uncles gone? And so Narada Muni is responding to that question in the form of these verses, and this is one of those verses. So Narada Muni hasn't directly, addressed his question necessarily yet, but he's giving sort of the background here. All right, so with that context, we can sort of get into the verse now. If you look at the translation again, there's an analogy being made here of a cow bound through the nose of, by a long rope. I thought it was interesting when I looked into this, when people tie ropes on a cow, one can think that you just tie the rope in a way where you're able to sort of steer the cow by whatever means, like, the rope is around their head or some approach. But specifically, the point being made here is that the way sometimes ropes are tied on a cow are through their nose. So the rope is literally inside the nose of a cow, which is actually quite painful, as opposed to just tying the rope around their body or their mouth to steer them. And so whenever you pull or tug on that rope, it causes pain in the cow's nose. And in order to subdue that pain, the cow has to move in that direction of the rope. Whereas the cow may not experience as much pain if they're just tied by the exterior of the body. And so there's somewhat, there's pain that's being administered on the cow through such means. Of course, there's a lot of activity to avoid from that happening today, and especially people that worship cows, not to tie the cow in such a way. But the analogy of this is being made to how, a human being, when they don't obey the laws of the Supreme Lord, they can they can suffer, and therefore they're conditioned to obey them if they don't want to suffer, ideally. So it talks about, there's a couple themes that I thought were important to discuss. First theme that sort of stuck out to me was this concept of what are the laws of the Supreme that Srila Prabhupada is talking about, or even in the translation. So in the purport, Prabhupada says the laws that he's referring to here of the Supreme are laws that are generally known as codes of religion. And for any religion, or most religions, that principle is to obey the orders of the Supreme Lord. That's sort of the underlying law, which is to obey the orders of the Supreme. And then, in order to obey those orders of the Supreme, there's certain rules and regulations that are prescribed in our scripture and in other religions. Like those that's how you obey the orders of the Lord. And the first direct point that's being made here is that Prabhupada is saying that no one can escape the laws of the Lord. Like no one is free from these severe laws of the Lord. And he specifically used the word severe here because there's literally no wiggle room. Like, like it cannot be disobeyed in any circumstances, is the point that's being made here. A story that I heard in sort of relation to this was, to help explain this concept a bit more, is in the Pacific Ocean, once there was this highest American Navy general that was commanding a warship, like the highest general of the American Navy was driving that ship, and it was misty, there was a lot of fog, and in that fog at night he sees this opposing light coming his way. So he's going in one direction, he sees an opposing light, all he sees is an opposing light coming in the opposite direction. And so he sends a message to that party saying, can you please change your direction, so we don't collide with each other. The other party responds saying, you change your direction. The warship or this army general says, hey, I'm the highest commander, you should listen to me. The other party responds saying, I'm a low level, captain. The army general says, well, I'm gonna bomb you and send a torpedo if you don't change direction. And the other party responds, I'm a lighthouse. And so the army general understands, the Navy general understands, well, yeah, he can't move, I have to move, otherwise we're going to collide. And similarly, when we try to reason with the laws like this, after many circumstances, you realize that you can't avoid them. You have to work around them. You have to obey them and really work around them. Another practical example of this might be when, if you look at sort of the rise in tsunami, or the ozone layer changing, climate change, and of course this can be argued. Some people believe in this, some people don't believe in this, but it's happening because we're trying to tamper with the natural laws, because we're messing with the environment in some way that you can't avoid it. It's the result is happening because of that, from a practical perspective. So this is sort of the theme of you cannot obey, escape the laws of the Supreme Lord. Now, when I first read this purport, one can maybe look at this purport as maybe almost, or the laws of the God, maybe one can look at them as God-fearing. It's like, if I don't do this, then things won't go right. And it can seem very, God-fearing versus God-loving almost. And so I think as you read this multiple times, it sort of shows that instead of seeing these as, do's and don'ts of spiritual life, where you feel like I have to do this, the closest analogy that sort of comes is one has to see them as these laws, so to speak, as a loving embrace of a mother to a wavering child, where the child wants to do mischief, but the mother is just kindly advising the child what they can do. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada succinctly says the only way to get out of entanglement is to agree to obey the Supreme Lord, right? It's not that God will punish you because if you don't follow the orders of the Lord. It's that when you don't follow the orders of the Lord, you're under the modes of material nature, and therefore you suffer as a result of that, not because God is choosing to punish you, right? So it's a God-loving embrace, not a God-fearing mentality. I've heard this quote from Radha Maharaj where he says, without free will, there cannot be the possibility of true love. So Krishna is giving that free will to us at the end of the day. So we have the choice to proceed in life in terms of how we obey these orders or how we don't. When we misuse that free will, as in when we don't sort of go according to the prescribed rules and regulations in scripture, then we're under the control of the laws of karma, or the modes of material nature. So then when we're suffering due to that misbehavior, that misbehavior that we did wasn't God's will. That was our choice, that we decided not to follow those rules. And so our karmic reaction is by God's will, who has ultimately given you that free will. So it's in the one sense, it's the will of Krishna that you get the reactions of your free will. But again, everything's happening under the will of God, but we have a free will on how we choose to reciprocate with Krishna. He's not governing that. He's not directing us at that. So when I was reading this, again and again, it really sort of hit home the point where this is not meant to be punishment. If you don't obey the laws or these things, you will be doomed, or things won't happen the right way. It's that you will suffer because you're under the laws of karma or modes of material nature. So there's a God-loving component to this aspect. The third theme that sort of stood out to me in this purport was Srila Prabhupada talks often about this point of the Supreme Lord's laws are more powerful than state laws. He says that the spiritual laws are best made by the Lord, not the state laws made by man. They're imperfect, right? This is what he's saying. And he qualifies that by saying that the Lord has principles that work in any time, place, or circumstance. The principles aren't specific to race, geographic location, or anything. They're universal in nature. They've been that way since time, forever. Now, how these principles get implemented might change over time, like how certain rules and regulations get implemented might change from temple to temple, or in different ways, but the principles don't take amendments over time. They've been the same. Like worshiping the Lord has never changed as a principle. The rules and regulations have not changed. They've been that way for forever. On the other hand, state laws or laws in a country are very much governed by these different denominations to some extent, right? Like what party you're a part of, Democrat, Republican, or race, in India could be by caste and whatnot. And it really changes over time, all the time, not just the implementation of the law, but like the principle itself, it changes. It doesn't stay that way. A clear example of this is, for example, it's a known fact that drinking alcohol is bad for you, right? And there's certain countries and states or places across the world that don't necessarily, ban that for underage drinking. They let it happen because their principle or way of looking at it is that it's fine if you drink or take drugs below a certain age. It doesn't matter. Like it's actually something of debate in society. Same goes for drugs, or same goes for things like capital punishment. These are debated things that you might think are very obvious, laws, but these are the kind of state laws that keep changing and cause debate in today's society. And this is kind of where Srila Prabhupada is saying that the Lord's laws, they never change, and those underlying principles don't change. Again, how you might implement it might change. And just to close that point out, the secular state, right, Prabhupada says, allows the citizens to break the laws of God and restricts them from disobeying the laws of the state. But Prabhupada is saying that people in general suffer more by not following the orders of the Lord, but they might be the best class citizens of the state per se, because by following the laws of the state, you're not necessarily addressing the core problem that a soul or human being is experiencing in this material world. You're just sort of addressing the externals, so to speak. So those were some of the main things that I felt were important discussing in relation to this translation, where the take-home point really is, if we don't practice Krishna consciousness, right, or these spiritual concepts, we're conditioned to the aspects of the material world. Again, not punished, but we're conditioned to the aspects of this material world. So with that, I'll stop here. I'm really not very well versed in this area, so I really invite other devotees on this call to please add anything that I've missed or miscorrectly stated. Or any comments or discussion, we can start with that.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. I think it's the first time you are speaking here. It's very nice to see you and hear from you. And you have nicely covered I especially liked your example story in the Pacific, and how the humans tampering with the nature's laws has endangered the environment so badly. All that are very, very beautiful, connected with this one. If you can just enlighten us a little bit about the codes of religion, or how these laws are given to humanity, like a Manu Samhita or something like that, that would be nice.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. So just to repeat your question, you were saying if we can enlighten or elaborate more on the laws themselves and how they're given. Is that?
Yeah. How they come to us. Yeah.
I mean, off the top of my head, if I think about this, I think there's two primary ways, right? One is through scripture itself, what's presented in Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, and the other part is through acharyas or spiritual masters. Of course, through each different yoga, Krishna's personally come in some way and conveyed these things through his pastimes or through his acharyas. But in a practical sense today, I feel like those are the two ways for us to understand those laws specifically.
Okay, thank you. I've only heard about the Manu Samhita, and that is basically the laws for a laws book. But I was wondering if you have some research on that one, what it is like.
Yeah, actually, I don't really. Yeah, I'm not.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. We're at a question on the chat. I'll read it out loud, which is, are the laws of God being referred to here just karma, or is there something more to it than that? Yeah, I had the same question when I was discussing this with Nitya. What exactly is this being referred to? My reading of this was specifically when it keeps saying the laws of God. It's talking about the core principle of worshiping Krishna, but then being under the modes of material nature, whatever laws there are, with the modes of material nature, and karma is one of them. Like the fact that you have to have karma as a result of that. That was also my understanding of that. Yeah. Anything else that people like to add in or bring up?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, this is Jain. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Just out of your experience or anyone from the Vaishnava community assembled today, where there has been a conflict of what the I did hear the example of the lighthouse. That's, but something that's more basic, where the laws of the state are in conflict with the laws of God or philosophy, because these are two different words. But as such, in the ideal situation, they should be similar, but obviously, there will be deviation. But any other examples, from your experience?
Yeah, there's a couple obvious ones that maybe come to my mind, which is, for example, in the country of China, right, you can't even practice religion openly or religious practices openly. You have to do it underground. It has to be hidden because that's the law of the country. In the US specifically, that what comes to my mind is the example that I was giving about, one of our rules and regulations is no intoxication. But one can say that, right, that the laws today allow a person to really freely drink as much as they want with sort of no limits whatsoever. And so one can say it's sort of against what we are trying to abide by as being devotees. So that's sort of another, maybe practical one I can think of. If any others have examples of that, feel free to share.
Yeah, I think they are trying to make medical marijuana legal in many states.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
actually that's actually the other example I was
there's
thinking of
probably
where
some benefit, from some extreme situations, but how much they're going to control that, right? Through governing bodies is again up for debate. Or how much of it is truly in benefit of humanity versus commercial reasons. So,
yeah, I was gonna say that's actually a very big topic in the US, where some states are absolutely for it and some states are absolutely against it within the same nation. Like there's so much polar opposite views on this, specifically that one, medical marijuana. Yeah. Okay, if nothing else, we can stop here. Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.